Hello and welcome to the Secretariat. You're watching the Global Capsule. Sushma, let's start with Nepal.
Yes.
We have seen how situation has become sort of out of control in Nepal. Of course, the Gen Z protests started with on an anti-corruption plank, but gradually things have gone out of hand. The parliament building was burned. Things are really not in a good shape. Chaos has completely taken over. What do you think India's stand should be? What should be the course of action that New Delhi should take?
Right now, of course, negotiations are going on between Gen Z and some of the leaders that they like. One of them, of course, is a former Chief Justice, and one of them is the mayor of Kathmandu. But the army is coordinating everything. So I think the reports are that India is in touch with the military leadership and obviously would like to play a supportive role. And I think that's what it should be doing, playing a supportive role.
We see things going out of hand in Nepal. We saw the same happening in Bangladesh last year. Sri Lanka a few years ago had gone through the same kind of a situation. Now with South Asia being under stress, a kind of a political turmoil, how do you think India will be impacted by all these
events?
Yes.
Well, I think the plus point is that we must see that our own country has never had to face anything like this. We have had our own, protests and demonstrations, and you remember the anti-corruption movement that people were involved in. But there was nothing that brought down a government. We may have had protests which led to elections, but everything has been done in a very democratic way.
Yeah, democracy prevailed.
There's been no violent revolution. And the reason for that is because India's democratic institutions have managed to defuse any kind of issues at the ground level. I mean, if there is a problem with the people, they know they have their elected representatives they can go to. They know they can go to the media. They know they can go to the judiciary. So all the pillars of the Constitution have been standing firm. And I think we should be actually rather proud of, our country, that despite the problems that are plaguing the rest of South Asia, as you rightly said, I mean, the same thing happened in Sri Lanka. They went through the presidential palace, they burnt down everything. Similarly, in Bangladesh, the young people, went and overturned the regime at the Sheikh Hasina. And now we are seeing it in Nepal. And I think one of the reasons is that the people who were in government, who were the political leaders, they did not realize that the aspirations of the poor are the things that they must deal with first. Instead, there has been, in the case of Nepal, we now are getting reports of so much of corruption that was apparently transparent, which is why, as you said, the Gen Z, these young people came onto the streets. Bangladesh, again, it was young people, if you recall, the youth who came onto the streets because of the talk of corruption. Sri Lanka, similarly.
And if you notice, Sushma, corruption has been a very common plank.
Yes.
In Sri Lanka, we saw it was primarily corruption-led issues which finally gave way to that kind of a protest.
Yes.
In Bangladesh, it was the same thing against Sheikh Hasina government. And now in Nepal, we see the same thing, corruption. The entire protest and the events started with anti-corruption being the thrust.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's a frustration among the Nepali people because they thought that in 2006, when they abolished the monarchy, and after a few years they got a new constitution, they thought that their democratic institutions would function as they have in India. But the fact is that they have never had a stable government. I think in the last, ever since 2008, they've probably had 7 or 8 prime ministers. And governments have been changing, they've had coalitions. So there's been no stable government. On the plus side, it has to be said that poverty in Nepal, and this the World Bank itself has also pointed out, poverty has reduced considerably in Nepal over the last decade or so. But the reason for that is not economic development in Nepal. The reason for that is because people from Nepal have been migrating to other countries like the UAE and other West Asian countries, Malaysia, and they have been sending money back home. Now, these remittances, which are huge, they have bolstered the foreign exchange reserves of Nepal. And that is how every family in Nepal probably has one person abroad.
You're so right, Sushma. In fact, you've written a piece for us as well.
Yes.
How remittances have been driving the economy of Nepal.
Exactly. And not just the other thing that is driving the economy is tourism. And tourism, unfortunately, went into a slump after COVID, and it really hasn't picked up after that because the governments have not been able to improve the infrastructure, provide the modern amenities that people are looking for. Of course, we must point out that the bulk of tourism in Nepal comes from India. So people come to see the scenic, Nepal is a beautiful country, come to see the scenic beauty. They also come for religious tourism because you have temples like the famous Pashupatinath temple. People come to do darshan there. So the country has been, I would say, in the ICU for quite some time. It didn't look it because people are not that poverty stricken. But the situation is dire because, as I wrote in my article, unemployment has been at a very high level of about 10% for the last decade or so.
Sushma, moving away from Nepal, let's look at the US. Of course, US President Donald Trump has always been in news. He never fails to surprise us or shock us. Now, recently he described Mr. Modi as a very good friend of his. He said that India-US relations have always been very, very strong. But again, at the same time, he's asked the European Union to impose tariffs, extra tariff, 100% tariff on India, of course, as well as on China. But wrath is on India and China for buying Russian oil. How do you read this situation?
Well, when you talk about Trump, you saw I started smiling, I think
everybody does that.
Everybody does now. Because the contradictions that you're talking about is, I think that is inherent in whatever he does. Now, you very rightly pointed out, he has made two statements in a row where he has praised the relationship with India and said it's very important, Indo-US relations. He has praised the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, and said he's a very good friend of mine, though I don't like what he's doing right now. I don't like the fact that he's buying Russian crude oil, but I like him very much. And the latest one, of course, said that we are going to enter into a trade agreement with India. I must say our Prime Minister has reciprocated both times and said all very nice things. Yes, we also favor this relationship, and it's a very long-standing relationship. But significantly, Prime Minister Modi has not said that President Trump is my friend. Now, he's not said that any longer.
That is true.
I think he's dropped that aspect of the relationship. But you're very right that the contradiction once again, he goes to Europe, or he urges Europe to levy 100% tariffs on China and India. And I think, in a sense, what he is looking at is that the burden of this kind of punitive sanction be borne by Europe rather than by US. Because if the United States decides to drop the punitive 25% tariff, which could happen because we don't know how President Trump will veer from day to day, he would probably say that, well, now it is for Europe to impose these kind of sanctions, because actually the fact is that petroleum products processed from Russian crude oil in India have been bought by European countries, not by America. To some extent also by America, but largely by Europe. So it is for them, he feels, to actually impose sanctions.
And put the pressure back on India.
So, but of course, it is once again contradictory, and I don't think we should try and put too much of a spin on what President Trump is saying, because tomorrow he may say something else.
And also the fact that the bilateral trade negotiations are on track. The two sides are continuing with talks. So that is something which we need to sort of keep in mind as well.
That's a great plus point, because now we are getting this information from the Commerce Minister also,
Yes.
that a negotiating team from America is coming now in September, third week of September, and they are going to go ahead, resume the trade talks which had been stalled. So, and it is very clear, I think the United States has understood that India is not going to back down from the red lines it had laid down in the case of dairy and agriculture, as well as GMO foods. So clearly the delegation that is coming is going to talk about the rest of the issues, because those areas they have understood are now sacrosanct. So let's
That's
hope
an
for
interesting point, Sushma, and we'll have to wait and watch how the negotiations, sort of what kind of
how they pan out.
Absolutely. Global crude oil prices, that has been a topic forever. And now with Israel attacking Qatar, especially after this Hamas thing, to put pressure on Hamas. I mean, this attack has already started having an impact on global crude oil prices. Now, global crude oil prices going up would definitely impact India. On one hand, we see trade negotiations are not going the way it was sort of expected to. Tariffs have gone up. Now with global crude oil prices, in case they start really increasing, how do you think India will be impacted, and what should India really do?
This is, of course, a marginal increase right now. I think they've gone up to $67 for the benchmark Brent crude. But you're very right. The fact that Israel has attacked that Hamas delegation in Qatar is attacking a country, one of the major oil and gas producing countries of the world.
Yes.
So that is, and that so far the conflict between Israel and Gaza has not affected any other oil producing country, except for that brief period when Israel attacked Iran and there was a to and fro at that time. But otherwise, the rest of the region has been not affected. So this is the first time that a very major oil and producing country has been hit, and this is bound to have ramifications. We must mention, of course, that Prime Minister Modi called up the Qatari Emir after this attack and I think expressed his support, which is a little unusual because so far we have been supporting Israel quite a bit in this conflict. We have tried to be neutral, but definitely we have been tilting towards Israel in this whole conflict. But the impact on crude oil prices, of course, for India, as you point out, we are one of the biggest consumers of oil. We import 85% of our requirements. And if crude oil prices go up, it will definitely impact our exchequer. As of now, what has happened is that for the last few months, OPEC has been trying to actually drive prices down. They have been little concerned over the shale gas production of the US and the fact that they are getting a commanding share of the market. So they're trying to reduce the market share of American shale gas producers, and they are actually reducing their quotas, or rather, sorry, they are diluting their quotas and allowing countries within the OPEC to increase their production. So the kind of voluntary cuts that had been imposed by them last year are gradually being unwound. Now, as I said, the idea is that the prices will go down. Shale gas producers will find it uneconomic to produce at these levels at $60 or $70 per barrel. But this strategy may not work if there is a problem in West Asia, if there is this conflict flares up and prices shoot up. So we'll have to see in the next few days how the market responds.
And what you said is interesting, Sushma. The fact that PM Modi called up the Emir, it actually shows that India is going to be driven by its own national interest and strategic autonomy when it comes to foreign policy.
Exactly, because this is an area of energy security. Because India is more interested in oil supplies from West Asia, from Qatar and UAE and all these other countries, rather than maintaining its very great strategic relationship with Israel.
Absolutely. Right, that is all we have for now. Thank you for watching and see you next week. Thank you.